go on the back here. If I'm doing anything important or critical, I'll let you know. It's the same issue that was on the original piece with that rotation I placed. I've just had to go in and snap the reset the X form on this piece. So obviously the biggest orientation change in the topology is back here, where it kind of branches off from being straight into this rounded edge here. So to do that, I'm just going to cut an edge loop from this point. I'm going to delete this polygon and drag out from here. And then just like so, I've kind of gone in and altered the way that topology is aligned. Now I can go in and connect down like so and remove this, and just checking from the side that that's all okay. Connecting from that edge that I just kind of realigned, and now the topology is flowing nice and evenly through this direction and through this area. And this is actually a very hard edge on the back of the model. So I might actually go in and make this have a third edge on the center here, which is very rare for me to do. And I'll only ever do that on areas that are like extremely sharply tooled metal. Everything else, you notice, I probably get away with having two edges to create the hardness, and maybe a third supporting edge, but nowhere near as close. So what I mean by that is I might go in and actually connect one more edge down here, and that'll let me create another edge coming off at an angle, and I can go in and kind of create that hard edge like that. But for now I'm going to leave it, and I'll just pull these together. I'm going to snap this like so. So basically I've got the concept art up on the back here that I'm looking at on the left, and I'm just going to now drag in this inset here, and then I'll get it to kind of create this tiny little bevel on the edge, and then I'll pull the geometry in. Scaling it in. The reason I'm scaling it is because you can see right now all the edges don't really fan inwards, and as you scale that, they actually kind of align a bit more correctly. Scale that in like so. I've got to pull this up until this point here, and now I need to drag out from here. I'm going to snap this. I have two edge loops. So now it looks like for this gold plated piece underneath, it's like a vent intake, so it actually goes in here. So just before I try and block this out, I'm actually going to finish off with the upper area here, and then I'll get working on this gold intake. Just taking a close look at the topology here because I'm not entirely happy with how that's kind of working. What I'm going to do is I'm going to connect these two edge loops. I might need to play around with this a little bit more. You can see what I've done there is I've just kind of, rather than having this point connect here and then come out, now it rounds a little bit more, and it's doing something similar to what we've got on the front of the mesh in the neck intake. Let me just bring up the reference. In this area here. Alright, now I'm going to start working on the gold plate area. So the first thing I'm going to do is just drag out from the top. I'm going to weld these two. Basically, I'm just going to finish it off as a complete piece. just very roughly. And then from here, what's the best way to do this? It's quite a tricky area. Okay. It's a very tricky piece, so I'm just kind of playing with how the topology is kind of flowing off of it into the outer edge, because I'm going to have to delete the inside here. So I'm just thinking it might be easier to delete this area now and kind of pull it in. Like so. And then when that kind of gap is created, it's easier to figure out how to connect them from that point. So just bridge these back up. And that's pretty much the perfect topology for something like this. So there's going to be a small adjustment made down here just to get this kind of rounding happening. So I'm going to go in, make a couple of small tweaks to the area. So even though the topology is low res, it's still quite a challenging concept to deal with. You know, you've got so many edges kind of flowing off of each other. You know, you've got a hard edge here, but then it rounds in, then it goes underneath, and then it kind of softens off down the bottom. Now I probably need to go in and add another edge loop on the center here. So when I do that, and you can see it's just connected a little bit off, I'm just going to simply drag it out. Drag it to the edge here, and then back in. And now I'm going to use this just to create a flat base to it. Just going to flatten this area off. All the little things like this, like the inconsistencies with how that's sticking out, I can just start to fix those. So what I've done here is I've selected the outer edge of this metal piece and I put a chamfer around it. So because when you chamfer it, you can see here we've got these square edges. As soon as I do that, it adds a second level of detail around. So now I've got an edge loop which I can go in, select it and delete it. None of the topology's changed, but it's set up later on for when I add the edges, add the supporting edge loops, it's going to flow around. So I'm going to unhide the rest of the model so far and just see where I'm at, see what pieces need to still be blocked out. I know there's the back of the head to do, we've got the back of the neck pieces to do. Maybe I'll go in and add a little bit of detail like this inset here. Just hide unselected on everything. Just going to look for little areas where I think I can probably go in, and so I'm just chamfering this off just to create. Actually, I'm going to keep it up here and I'll just flow connect up here, trying to keep the polygons a little bit more evenly distributed. I'm also going to need to go in and create a stand for the model to sit on so that when we render it, it doesn't look like it's just floating in space. I can actually have a floor and I'll just show you that over here. So that'll just be the stand underneath here. Might not do the exact same one, but it'll be something along the lines of that. So I'm going to keep the blocking out phase continuing on the back of the neck area. So to do this area, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the back. All I've got visible now is the neck piece and the back blueprint. But as you can see, once again, it's kind of hard to determine how things look with X-ray mode on, simply because I'm not able to see through the front of those pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select them. I'm just going to detach the front. I can always attach them later. I'm probably not going to make many modifications, but because it's only one polygon thick at this point, even if I do end up moving some of these vertices, I can simply just weld them again. So now you can see it's much easier to pinpoint how this is meant to look. Delete one half and paste the symmetry over the top again. So it looks like the neck piece kind of breaks off into two separate parts. You've got the front area and the back area. So I'm going to connect an edge loop going up each one of these points here. This one that I can't see, I'm just going to go in and do this here. I'm going to select these three, chamfer them to create the spacing, and now I'm going to go in, delete those like so. from the looks of the reference, it's quite flat on the back area. So I'm not gonna make it completely flat, but I'm just kind of leveling this area out a little. Now I'm also going to unhide everything, select the side blueprint, and then hide again. So I think what's happening here is it kind of branches out at this point and goes into a separate neck piece. So I'm just going to cut that in there. Shame for these two apart. So I'm going to come back to this area here. But just before I do, I might just go ahead and... Actually, you know what? I'll leave it for now. I was going to go in and add the kind of inner bevels on the back of the neck, but I might be making some heavy modifications to this area. So I'll just leave it for now. Just take one more look at things. Just going to head back to this kind of central reactor area, and I'm going to create the second bevel that goes inside. Swap this to the front view. Now you can see there's a second row here that I need to close. So I'm going to turn off the symmetry. Before I do that, I'll actually just weld this point up here. So now I'm going to jump back to the back of the head area and just try and quickly block that out, just to round out the lesson. I know there's a little couple of, like, there's another couple of smaller areas, and I think if I don't get to finishing the tiny details on the mesh, like just some of the riveting and little insets on different parts, I'll do like a third and final kind of 30-40 minute long lesson. So after this lesson, there'll be another 3-4 hours of content on the Ironman just to finish all these details off, get the base done underneath, and try and get the turbo smooth working on as much as physically possible. Then I'll go in and work on some little tiny refinements if needed, if that's not enough time to finish that off. Just mirroring this over to the other side. So right now I'm just taking a look at the back of the head in the reference here, just to determine how many kind of these panels there are that make up the back, and where the panels run along in terms of the angle. So right now you can see the angle we've got going here isn't exactly right. So to do these last two pieces, and obviously there's the connection that comes off the top of the head as well that I haven't cut in. Let me just show you that. You know, that you can see there's the line here that cuts through. I haven't cut that in yet. So I'm just trying to determine whether, like, how I'm gonna do that. So I'm actually going to detach this piece from the head. I'll copy all of the modifiers on top and just hide this. I'm just going to assign a separate material for a second here with 0 opacity, which is different from the X-ray mode because now I can see directly through. So the easiest thing to do here is probably just like what I just did, just rotate that topology until it's lined up with the crease, and then worry later on about going in up here and getting that topology kind of rounding out more. There's going to be some kind of trickery involved to get that rounding off nicely again. Very rough modifications here, and this is where you can see going in and doing such a high res mesh up the top might not have been the best idea, but you know what, at the end of the day, at least I get to show you the importance of keeping things as low res as possible. Now the cylinder I placed around the edge had 16 sides, and you can see that coincides with the topology I've got running around the head also. So that I know that when I perfectly align these points to the perimeter of that 16 side cylinder, it's going to create that nice perfect circular kind of edge running along here. Whereas if I say had 16 an uneven number of points leading up to here, I'd have to once again go in, probably loop around, and then use the the regularize tool to get that perfect. So it's easier just to set a cylinder on the inside with the same corresponding amount of edges and then line these points up to that. Right now I'm just trying to get that edge lined up to the reference. You can see here, I'm trying to create this one here. Just giving myself more topology to work with here. I'm going to connect that off, remove the inner right edge to create a square polygon. And now I'm left with another tricky situation. I've got a relatively flat area here, so there's a couple of ways I can terminate this. I can either put an edge loop up here and then connect along here and then try and even things out. Or if I'm confident in my ability to get this smoothing without adding more detail, I can actually remove some of the detail, even though we don't have the edge loops lining up anymore, and hopefully get away with that by removing these two. But knowing that this is a very complicated kind of area, I'm going to go with the more detailed approach and just require a little bit more fine tuning. So I'm going to connect up the top here and do a flow connect here, and then just start to balance it out with edge constraint turned on. Take a quick look at how this is going. It's not bad. It's a little bit, it's going to require a bit of tweaking. You can see that it's just bumping out a bit too much here. I'm going to need to round that. So basically what I mean is I'll just turn on screen mode and turn off edge constraint. It just needs to be a bit softer in how it kind of transitions from the hard edge. Now you can see that's looking a lot better. So if I zoom in and just show you the before and after. This whole area kind of needs to come out a little bit. I'm going to save that for the next lesson though. So now I'm detaching off this piece, and just to continue blocking it out, I'm actually going to go in and delete every second edge loop here to make things easier on myself. I'm going to add a symmetry to it and collapse this. Actually, before I do that, because this piece does go all the way to the center, and you can see I've continued this kind of beveled inset that goes on the top of the head, I'm going to have to cancel that at some point, but for now I'll just leave that. Basically, I'm going to go in, delete these two inside faces, and bring these back to 0. I'm going to make some small adjustments here. Just going to rotate this slightly. And now for this piece, I can actually get rid of that and start thinking about how rounded this back actually needs to be. Just very, very roughly slapping all this stuff into place here, because I just want to get a look of things kind of all sitting together, all the paneling. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with where things are going. Obviously there's a lot of detail to add at the higher resolution stage, but I just wanted to block out the overall proportions of everything so I can start to go in and cut the little details like that in. So in the next lesson I'm going to start off on this shoulder piece. That's the second biggest piece compared to the faceplate in terms of difficulty level. So I'm going to work my way kind of towards easier parts of the mesh. So we're going to start with the shoulder pads, then I'm going to move on to creating this chest plate. Then I'll go in and do the back, and then I'll finalize everything by doing the neck and kind of underneath the chin and adding the depth to all the plates. Thanks guys, and I'll see you in the next lesson.